Welcome to this episode of The People Dividend with Mike Horne. I am delighted to have in our virtual studio today, Debra Boggs. Why am I delighted? Because I think she's going to help us to understand, to everyone who's listening, returning listeners, new listeners, about executive search, about board placement. Debra Boggs is founder and chief executive officer of D&S Executive Career Management. She's an award-winning entrepreneur, an international speaker, and a recognized expert in executive career growth, C-level job search strategy, and board candidate best processes. I know that many of you in the audience are in senior roles in people and culture and human resources, and are often thinking about pathways to boards of directors, boards of trustees. So this will be an episode that you'll be sure you want to listen to. Debra Boggs was also recently honored by Forbes as a Next 1000 entrepreneur and is currently a member of the Forbes Business Council. Additionally, she is a founding member of the Career Industry Authority and holds a master's degree in management. So, Debra, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Can you say a few words about yourself to our audience, please?
Yes, thank you so much, Mike. Thanks for the warm welcome. I'm really excited to be here. So people say to me, "What is career management? What does that mean?" And our firm really works with VP, C-level, and board level candidates to prepare for and navigate their high-level searches. So we're not a search firm. We don't do placements, but I tell people we're like the home stagers to make a luxury property look expensive before it goes on the market. So that's around packaging things and getting you ready for your search, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, that's a great way to describe it, Debra, about staging a home for, a multi-million-dollar sale. Because in the past, people used to say something about dressing up pigs, and I really prefer this analogy a whole lot better about staging the home for a great sale. And I think Debra has a lot of credibility because, from what I understand from the background reading that I did for today's episode of The People Dividend, is that she started writing resumes as a side hustle. Because it really was a reflection of her passion to help job seekers put their best foot forward with confidence and to land a job and a salary that they didn't think was possible. And that really, I think, comes out of the abundance mode. You did that for a while, and then what happened? What you were doing the side hustle? You got a side gig going on, writing resumes for people to secure these beautiful jobs. What happened?
I did. I was doing it on the side. I was, my children were young, and it was kind of a side passion project, right? I just really enjoyed it, and it really snowballed into taking over my life. Short end of the story. It was really around, we got so many referrals and just opportunities to work with new people, and I started, a few years into it, I really started to niche down into working with executives because I found that the executive search is different. The search for a leadership level role is different. And there weren't a lot of firms out there that were specifically focusing on leadership level candidates. And so when I started to really niche down into just focusing on that space and then the board space, our firm started to grow. We got a lot of opportunities. I brought an amazing team on board kind of little by little, and now I run the business full time. And we've got an amazing team of about 12 of us throughout North America. And it's fun because now we get to listen to people that do amazing work in the world. It's like mini TED Talks every day. What's going on in the industry? What's happening? What are the challenges? And so, I would say it was an evolving process. We're in D&S 3.0, I would say, right now as a business. We really started in that space of side hustle and then established business model, but really still just me and now a team of people.
You said that executive search is different. And I guess as a consequence of that thinking, it means that people have to take themselves to the marketplace in a whole different way. Can you talk a little bit about that? What's different about executive search as opposed to, looking for your next gig or your next job?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an important topic, and it comes up all of the time because at the executive level, you have to think about the fact that there are far fewer jobs. A company may have 20 people in the marketing team, but they only have one chief marketing officer. or, 20 people on the HR team, but one CHRO. And so the competition is higher because there's less opportunities. And also at that level, having 20 years of experience in HR is going to be table stakes to get into an interview, right? You have to show how you've been driving results, how you've been performing at a really high level to really land those roles. And so the way you think about taking yourself to market has to be different. You have to show up differently. And a lot of times our clients have built an amazing career. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners are in the same space where they've built an amazing career through their network, through getting promoted or recruited to different things. And now they find themselves at a level where they have to take themselves to market at a different level they've never had to do before. How do you communicate your value? How do you talk about how you do things differently when people don't already know what you can deliver? And then the other piece that makes it different, and I see a mistake all the time that executives kind of fall into this trap of they're going back to what's comfortable. They're going back to what all of the online like advice says about applying online, going through the application process, things like that. That advice isn't for executives or for leaders. It's for mid-career and below, right? And so when you're applying online, number one, not many executive level jobs are filled through online applications. So there's a lot fewer opportunities and a lot more competition. And so then you just get rejection after rejection after rejection, which doesn't help with your self-confidence. And then that hurts your executive job search. And so it's kind of a spiral, right? So those are the two things I would say differently: showing up differently and the job search channels are different.
It's so interesting. Over the course of my career, I led one organization, I led the talent acquisition team. So I had 70 recruiters around the world, filling jobs all of the time. They were jobs in technology. So we had, I had recruiters in Bangalore and Singapore, in Silicon Valley, and other locations throughout the world. Later at a different point in my career, I was head of human resources, and still had a team of recruiters, which I didn't manage, and had capable people doing that. But often for my executive team, I was the person who was responsible for executive search. I was the head of HR. If the chief scientific officer, wanted to hire someone, it was, on me. And I always partnered with a search firm because it really wasn't the gig. It wasn't the routine of our,
Right.
very smart and talented people in talent acquisition, because we were looking for often needles in the haystack. We were looking for executive fit, and always relied on search firms to bring us the C-suite caliber of executives into the organization. Again, no discredit to the outstanding folks who worked in search, even in executive search, maybe for VP positions or VP ascendant positions, but really for those top positions, I always relied on search. Why? Why did I do that? Was it just confidence? What do you think about my instincts? I mean, you've acted with a lot of chief people officers, chief human resources officers. What do you think it is that prompts them to go that route?
Well, I think I think your instincts are right. There's a lot at stake when you hire a C-level employee, right? But, I mean, the comp certainly, they may have severance negotiated in there. It's going to be an expensive hire if you do it wrong. And I've seen, and I know offline we were talking about universities. I'm very familiar with a university from my hometown that made a bad hire for the president, right? But they didn't do a search firm, and now they've had a lot of reputational risk now going back and having to redo it and going through a national search. And so I think it's one of those things, we don't do it all the time. The stakes are really high. And I always feel like I kind of joke with my team, if we have something really big going on, I'll bring in a consultant, because when the stakes are high, I want an adult in the room. And sometimes I'm not the adult for whatever it is we're trying to do, right? And so that's when you bring in the professionals. And I think when you're going through a C-level search, an executive search firm is the best choice for a lot of organizations, which is why most of those jobs aren't listed online. You don't want every person who thinks they can be CEO to be applying to your job. You want to have a really targeted search firm find the profile of the person you're looking for.
And I think what happens in a lot of organizations, because of a desire to be transparent or to have equity in postings, is that in client organizations that I was familiar with, is you would note that internally that external search being conducted, um, uh, and you want to be transparent about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point that executives can cost a lot of money, so does executive search. I mean,
Right.
this at times might be a recruiter's salary for, a half a year or a year, thinking
Mm-hmm.
about it. So we really want to think about the stakes that are at play. What I also noticed with executive search is that often the great search professionals had been developing candidates for a long time, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe not a long time, but certainly, they had been developing candidates and they knew who to tap into
Yep.
in
They
the
know the
network.
players, they know who's interested.
Is very unlike, my great talent acquisition professionals. Can you comment a little bit about that in terms of search and how that works in terms of developing relationships with candidates over time or really knowing the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, an executive recruiter who really knows their space is absolutely invaluable through this process. They know what's going on. They know what the top candidates are bringing to the table. They typically will have relationships with people over the course of years. And even if they don't, they're spending the time to really get to know a candidate, and they're doing that pre-vetting so that your team doesn't have to do that. So I'm going to do a shout out to an executive search firm that I work with really closely. Fox Search Group does focuses in technology, and they work with all levels of technology, but certainly the senior levels as well. And what I love about the way that they work is I know I can call them, anybody on their team, at any time. I typically do it about quarterly to find out what's going on in the market. What are companies asking for right now? What's important to candidates right now? What do they see, in 60, 90, 120 days going on in the market in the future? And so they can offer that kind of advice and counsel in ways that, people on your team probably don't have the time to know everything there is to know about an industry.
And because I did a lot of executive search in the sciences, in biology, chemistry, in that world, often the search professionals that I worked with, not always and not exclusively, had PhDs themselves, so
Mm-hmm.
that they were quite comfortable talking science with others. Or if they did not have an advanced degree in science, they were so deeply and intimately involved with space that they knew the candidates who were out there in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And it always made a world of difference. So I guess that's perhaps one way that executive search differs from searches at other levels in organizations. Now, when you think about that at the board of directors or the board of trustees level, what comes to mind for you? I mean, and how is that? How does that differ?
Okay, so from if you're looking at maybe you've had a C-level career, or you've been a leader in your space, and you're looking at making that transition into board work, right? And how is that
Yes.
different from the job search? Yeah. So a couple of things. The biggest thing that I see people struggle with in that search for a board seat is the shift between is how you're positioning yourself, right? From an executive career role, you're positioning as someone who can deliver results, and you're doing, and and you're doing the vision, and you're getting people, behind your vision, and you're driving things forward. At the board level, your skills need to be a little different. You're advising the C-level team to do the things, right? So it needs to be a little bit more hands off, and you need to focus more on the strategic value that you can bring as an advisor and as a collaborative leader with other leaders, other big personalities in the room, of how can you help drive the long-term sustainability and growth of a company without physically doing it. And so thinking about the shift in those skills. And one thing, because I know a lot of your listeners are HR professionals and CHROs, things like that. I see a lot of CHROs want to make a shift to corporate board seats. And while there are
Stanford
opportunities,
has courses in it now on how to secure your board seat for HR people.
right? Perfect. Okay, I'll have to look into that one. I'm not familiar with that one. I
Yes.
do. I am familiar with their Women on Boards organization, but that's
Yes.
interesting.
Yes.
So the part for the thing that it has to that you have to think about as an HR leader is how can you help drive, you have to demonstrate your ability to drive business as well, and not just the people side of how have you partnered with leadership to drive business results and whatever it is you're going to do, because it kind of has to be that people and something else to help you stand out in the board seat. In that space as a candidate. So that's one thing that we like to think about is what is that unique value as an HR leader? Maybe they're looking at doing a global expansion and you've got experience in doing global expansion to launch into new markets and going through all of the regulatory things it takes to open business in a new market. Maybe it's that you worked through a complex M&A or a divestiture and had to do all the people processes around that. Those kinds of things, getting ready to do an IPO, and what do they have to think about from the people side of going public, and how does that change the landscape? And so it can't be just business as usual. You have to think about how you can support business through significant change.
Yes, as a coach to executives, to C-suite executives, I occasionally have board interaction with my clients' companies, particularly if the coaching is with the chief executive officer, because usually it's someone on the board that has said, we need to get this person a coach, or and they've delegated that task to the chief people officer, to the chief human resources officer. And even the chief human resources officer, even the chief people officer in today's parlance, certainly has a different relationship with the board of directors than they do their peers, the CFO, the chief marketing officer, the chief this or that. It's a different level of interaction. And even in my work as a coach to when I'm coaching the senior most executive in the organization, the CEO, and there's board interaction, there's certainly a different level of dialogue.
Right.
There's a different level of discussion. Often at the CEO level, it's often a question of assessment. Is this person really capable of continuing to lead this organization? And board members, to your point, have a different view. Where our jobs as senior leaders in organizations might be collaboration, cooperation, all the things that you mentioned. The board has a different fiduciary responsibility to the stakeholders or shareholders in a publicly traded corporation. So, what do you think? What are the top things a board level candidate needs to think about before they launch their seat for their search for a board seat? What are some of the top things a board level candidate needs to think about?
Yeah, so such a great question. One of the first things, if someone were to call me, and it happens daily, and say, I'm thinking about doing a board search or launching my board career, whatever it may be, the first question I kind of try to dig out is, are they board ready? Because I think a lot of people think they're board ready, and there's a lot more into it than, you don't go from no board work to public board seats, right? There's a lot of steps in the middle, and the process can take a long time. And so thinking about whether you have the necessary experience, background, things like that. We do some work with the board group for the New York Stock Exchange. And so I was talking to the leader of their program last week, and I said, what are companies looking for right now in their board members? And they said, very first thing is a C-level title. It's really hard to get on a public board without having held the C-level. So thinking about that, thinking about, your deep experience and then your network, because a board search is going to take a very deep network. It's, again, something you're not going to apply online for. The best data that we can find, only about 15% of board seats are filled through recruiters. There are board level recruiters, but that's a small number of seats. So you're going to have to rely on your network or build a network. So that's number one. Number two is the same thing I say to executive candidates looking for a career role is let's get really clear on your focus on what you bring as a candidate and what kind of organizations you're uniquely equipped to serve. Because at the executive level, I know we were talking a little bit about our backgrounds. I know you fall into this category, Mike, of you've done a lot of different things. You can do a lot of different things. You can offer value in a lot of different areas, but we can't try to be everything to everyone, or people don't understand what box we fit in. So get really clear about that focus and what kinds of companies, size of company, industry, business model, all of those things will help you then do the third part, which is getting your career assets in order, your board resume, your board bio, I suggest to candidates you have both of those documents. They're different documents, but the board resume and the board bio, because some recruiters and research I've done in understanding what these best practices look like across the board, kind of pun intended, is some board recruiters and some organizations will ask for a resume, some ask for a bio, and some ask for both. They're not interchangeable, so having both is helpful. And then a really strong LinkedIn profile. And I say that because so many people that we talk to have built amazing executive careers and have not needed to leverage their network or their digital brand. And at this point, when you're starting this search, you really do. And you need to think about your LinkedIn profile as being the first opportunity you're going to have to make a first impression. And so you have to think about the positioning of it, not only in the content, but the visual presentation, the visual identity. Your headshot is going to be vitally important. Get it done professionally at this level. And everything else needs to be pulled together. So you have to think about your executive visibility, your documents. You don't want to start reaching out to your network and have them ask for your resume and then not have anything to give them. You don't want to get caught flat-footed. So be prepared and then start your search.
It's so true. And I think about that in terms of LinkedIn because in my work with founders and other individuals in the C-suite, these folks, these men, women, are so busy with their careers that they're not on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram. They're not spending their time there. And often, if you can find their LinkedIn profile, they have 30 followers or something, or 40 followers, because they, unless there's an administrative professional behind them sort of saying, Mr. or Ms. C-suite executive, you need to have this. There are real challenges in doing that. So I'm so appreciative to hear you say that, Debra, who's the founder and CEO of D&S Executive Career Management. And we'll talk more about that. But so that's part of the preparation that a person would do to get ready for a board level interview. I have the right sort of CV, biography, profile, resume, whatever necessary. But I really resonated with what you said about having a network. And when does that start? When do you start doing that? When does that start to happen?
Well, it's such a great question. And actually, I'm going to pause that question real quick to tell you a funny story related to having to have LinkedIn dialed in as an executive, if you don't mind me taking us off course.
I would love to hear that.
Because I love what you said about, you don't understand the value of it if you're not using it all the time, if you can even be found unless there's people managing it for you. And that is so true. I think a lot of times executives, if they haven't needed LinkedIn, they don't understand the importance of it, and they don't understand how other people are using it, even if they're not. And so what's up there, what maybe has 30 followers, is still being seen by a ton of people. And so illustration of that is I had someone, a global president of a major fashion brand, and I bring this up because it makes the story hilarious, called me one day and said, I need your help with LinkedIn. She was looking for board work. And I said, absolutely, that's what we do. And she said, no, you have no idea. I need your help with LinkedIn. And I said, it's fine. This is our job. No problem. What do you need? And she said, no, you have no idea how much help I need. And she went on to tell me that she was preparing to have a dinner party and accidentally took the picture of the recipe of lasagna she was making it and made it her headshot on LinkedIn, totally accidentally. And then didn't know it for months because she doesn't use LinkedIn. And so she had a picture of lasagna, but she's a very public figure. And so other people were seeing her profile, and she was at a networking event, an industry dinner, and a junior person came up to her and said, I'm so excited to meet you. I've been dying to ask you why you chose lasagna. Because they thought, because of who she was, there was like an esoteric brand reason why she would have chosen lasagna as her headshot. And she had no idea what they were talking about and was horrified to find out that what she had out there was saying something about her brand, whether she was able to manage it or not. And that's when she realized, oh, wow, people are really paying attention and I need to up my game.
So true. I recently reviewed the LinkedIn profile of a CEO I've coached, and it wasn't a plate of lasagna, but it was something equally innocuous, like not his photograph, nothing that resembled a photograph of any human or cyborg. It was just totally like random and out of place. And what I thought about, to your point, Debra Boggs, is that never underestimate the number of lurkers who are out there.
Yes.
So even if you have 250 followers or 100 followers, never underestimate how many people are out there lurking. And what I noticed in executive search is that this would be one of the few occasions when my executives would actually look at LinkedIn, because they would say, who is this person we're hiring? And they, I think, often didn't realize that people were doing the same thing about them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I had lunch with an executive recruiter the other day who said a guy came to him. He's well qualified, resume looked great, ready to go. His LinkedIn headshot was him on a dolphin on vacation.
Yeah.
Like a bathing suit, like the whole, and he said, I can't, you've got to fix that before I put you forward. I can't put you forward for this job on a dolphin.
So, having done a lot of work early in my career, and having had the privilege of working with some thought leaders in career development, particularly in organization career development, I've always talked about career development as the three-legged stool. As an employee, you have your own set of responsibility. Your manager has a stake in your career development, and good managers do. And the organization has a role in creating pathways, profiles, all that sort of good stuff. As you think about that, what does career management mean, and why is it important, particularly at executive levels?
Yeah, we feel like career management means being proactive in the direction of your career, taking proactive ownership of where you're headed. And I think so many times people, and again, through their network, through their reputation of doing great work and all these things, walk through the doors that open for them, which makes tons of sense, especially early in our careers. But as we get mid-level and beyond, we really have the choice to be picky. We have the choice to really push for the things that we want in our careers. And so it's, how do you make goals for your career, whatever success looks like to you, which we know can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people, but what does success look like, and what are the steps you need to take to get there, and how are you going to be doing those things proactively to get to the ultimate goal you want? And that's where career management comes in.
So important. And, as you think broadly about the industry, and about all industries or across industries, what skills are most important for board level candidates right now?
Yeah, a big one right now that is really, I will say, trending in the board space is at least a base level understanding of the importance of cybersecurity. So while you don't necessarily have to be a cybersecurity expert, now there's certainly opportunities for cybersecurity experts, but there are even board programs out there right now to train the rest of the board on the areas of importance that matter for most companies right now in that space. So that's one that's kind of becoming more and more important. Same thing with regulatory and compliance. There's always a space for an auditor, right, on a board, things like that, to make sure that those things are buttoned up, that a company's doing what they should be doing, and that there's no surprises. Coming back to that point about fiduciary responsibility, there's more space than there had been in the past for general counsel or for legal leaders. So that's an area of opportunity I've been seeing. Same thing with CHROs, though. I tell my general counsel clients, it has to be your legal counsel and compliance and how you're helping the business, be sustainable and grow and things like that. So thinking about those areas where you can drive value. But the big thing that's really growing is the cybersecurity global expertise, understanding, depending on the type of company, global or international experience and operations, things like that are important too.
One of my coaching clients was a big deal at Facebook, now Meta. He was vice president of information security, cybersecurity, left because Meta, because he was recruited by another company to be, chief technology officer ascendant, chief information officer ascendant. And I think what he was doing very skillfully was he was still taking selective opportunities in the marketplace to talk about the issues in cybersecurity and information security that kept him connected. And, we're positioning him for these, for his CIO, CTO eventual role.
Right.
Whether he gets that role at, that's unknown. I mean, employment can be fickle. But is there some consistency, some persistency that a person needs to think about in terms of moving into the C-suite, in terms
absolutely.
of, their work? And
that's such a great question, especially if a CIO and a CTO both need to have a deep understanding of cybersecurity today, right? And so I think it's really important to keep those skills fresh, because it's hard to say, especially if you're looking at a board seat or if you're looking at the C-level, okay, well, I was an expert in that, but that was 5 years ago. Well, the space in cybersecurity is changing every day, right? Same thing with things like data and AI. I was talking to an AI leader the other day who said, they're constantly doing new programs because there are new training programs and things like that, because the ball is moving every day. And so I think the more you can stay relevant in those spaces that are going to be vitally important to companies, and then it comes back to around LinkedIn and things like podcasts and speaking engagements and webinars, is that executive visibility of not only do you know it, but are you demonstrating it out loud that you're staying, in touch with what's going on with those vital skills you'll need.
I think it's so important. I think about many of the seasoned executives with whom I have the privilege of coaching and working, is that they've been so focused internally, helping deliver the next product, worried about revenue, worried about managing, a large organization, maybe 10,000, in some cases, maybe 10,000 or 12,000 people in their own division, that they don't really think about things outside of the organization. Or, maybe they spent 10 years growing a very successful career inside an organization. And then when it comes to these points about, well, maybe somebody's had a disagreement with them on the board, or maybe, there's a new CEO and he or she or they are going to recruit some of their own people and bring in talent, they're often unprepared for the realities of fickle employment. Have you encountered those kinds of cases? What advice, or continuing guidance would you give?
Yeah, it's so important. And it goes back to the question I didn't answer earlier about when should you start thinking about a network. And, I spoke to a woman very recently in the last month or so who's C-level at her public traded company, huge company. She's been there nearly 30 years. And she said, it's time, for lots of reasons, it's time for her to start looking outside. But she does not have a network outside of her company. She said, I have a very deep network inside my company, but when it even comes to my industry, I've been so focused internal, I've not been focused external. And I think that happens
true for so many C-suite executives, I believe, Debra. Sorry to interrupt. Yes.
True. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's heartbreaking because she's got a deep experience and has delivered these amazing things, but she has to start from scratch on her network. And so I think, it's hard to think day to day about being ready for a job search in case you need it. But Nickerson PR is a firm that I had done a presentation recently on executive presence. And they said, it's not about getting ready, it's about being ready. And I think that's where you have to think about, you don't know when a new CEO is going to come in, or something crazy is going to happen in the market, or something may happen reputationally outside of your control that you need to start a job search. And the executive search can take a long time to find the right role at the right compensation with the right company. And so having your ducks in a row in terms of knowing what you want, having a network ready to go, that you can activate or call on, having your documents and your LinkedIn profile in place. And it's easy to say, but it's really hard to do when you're in crisis mode. It's a lot easier to do when you have the money and time to think about it than it is when it's on fire. So that's one thing that I like to just reiterate to people.
It's so interesting in executive search. I mean, again, having managed executive search in some organizations, is sometimes you're looking for that person who's been a VP and is ready to move into the senior vice president role. And I think if you're in the C-suite already and you're an executive and you're trying to decide, well, what candidate is the best fit, you do have that quality of ascendancy that you might be dealing with. This is a really bright individual, and they've reached the VP level. Now there's an opportunity to grow their career into a senior vice president. And I think what I noticed in working with some search firms is that they would bring these SVP ascendant candidates who were at great points in their career, or sometimes they brought someone who was already did it, they've done it, and they're really in the sunset of their career, but you're attracted to them because you know that they've done it before. Do you have any comments or thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have a good friend who's an executive recruiter in Boston, and she builds sales teams and sales operations for startups. So like CRO, so for chief revenue officers, things like that. And she said, when she's working with a company, she likes to bring 3 candidates. One is kind of ideally what they were asking for, right? Like right in line with the profile they asked for. One is up and coming, needs some edges smoothed out, needs some, a little bit of resource to get there, but can get there, kind of that up and coming. And then one who's been there, done that, safe.
Oh my goodness! Now you just explained what all these executive recruiters were doing to me. They were bringing me candidates just like that because we want 3 people, we want to interview them, we want to do it all in 3 weeks and make a decision.
Yep, and then that's what you get.
Yeah.
And she said that's what she delivers. And then it's up to the company on deciding, do they want the been there, done that safe choice? Do they want the one that's right in the middle? That may not be the right personality choice and executive fit, or do they want the one where they can kind of smooth and mold into what they need?
That's so true. So I think your guidance about preparing for search, about networking, it all makes sense in any of those cases. And you'll be able to learn more about Debra Boggs and her firm when you visit dscareermanagement.com. We'll have that in the show notes. And I do have 1 or 2 more questions for you, Debra. And as we discussed earlier in today's episode, we're not often finding these executive opportunities on job boards. So how can an executive level job seeker find opportunities if online job boards aren't the best option for them?
Yeah, such an important question. I think there's 3 channels that make the most sense for executive job seekers. And one of them, and not every channel makes sense for every job seeker. And so it depends on their goals and what they're looking for in runway and all of that. But one is, I know we've talked a lot about executive search firms and recruiters. That is a great choice if a candidate is kind of that profile we just talked about, right? Of looking for something really similar to what they've been in, they've done, their current title, things like that. If you're not looking to make a huge shift in your career, then executive recruiters are a great choice for you. And we can talk about, how to find recruiters. That's a separate conversation. But the other channel is certainly through your network, letting people know that you're open. And that, the key to that is going back to one of the first things we talked about is being really clear on your ask. You don't want to go to your network and say, keep me in mind for any openings. Here's my resume in case you see something that fits my profile. Not helpful. You need to let your network know what you want. People want to help, but you need to make it easy for them. So being really clear on your ask and then understanding, and your network doesn't have to just be who you're networked with right that second. I think about my director of client success. We met on a group like text messaging thread through another woman who works at Whole Foods. Your network does not have to be the executives you've worked with. It can be anyone, right? Anyone in your space. And so, and then thinking about then the third channel is focusing on the companies and not the jobs. What companies fit the profile of the work you're looking for? Where do you want to be? What kinds of companies make sense? You can see a lot of free data in Crunchbase to build lists of companies. I've got a video on that. If anyone's interested, reach out to me. But you can find the companies and then network in that way too. So there's a lot of different opportunities, but it's not best served just kind of slogging through online applications.
And often, maybe this is last question before we begin to wrap up, is thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging in executive search. For the most part, I would mandate when I was directing a search on behalf of the chief whatever, is
Right.
that we see diverse candidates. So important in so many ways. And often, for example, in the scientists or in certain parts of technology,
Mhm.
candidate pools are very narrow.
Yes.
Um, and you really rely on someone with experience in search to find and bring a diverse slate of talent, because it's not really about developing a pool of talent. It's about having a slate of folks
Right.
that you can interview. And what are some of the challenges, or what are your views or thoughts on that today?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. If we're only focused in our own networks to source talent, then our own networks are primarily going to look like us, right? I was just talking to my own team about this. We really struggle. Our industry, the career services, resume writing, career coaching industry, is very heavily female.
Very
And we have
heavily.
a really, really hard time finding male team members, even though we desperately want them. So male resume writers, reach out to me. I need to talk to you. But but we've been talking about how to get creative and getting out of our regular networks to find candidates that we're not getting in front of, right? And so search firms and specialty search firms can focus on that too. And I know um, Fox Search Group, again, I talked about them earlier, focus in technology. They focus in bringing diverse candidates and trying to diversify the technology space too, and bringing more women, people of color, things, more underrepresented candidates to the table so that we can get more diversity in, because companies are looking for it, boards are looking for it. All the data around how much better financially companies do when they've got diversity around the table. And for my company and my firm, we've got a lot of, I think, ethnic and racial diversity. We have no gender diversity, and it hurts us, because I know we have clients that would prefer to work with men, and we just don't have them. Plus, we've got a lot of female energy. We
Well,
need to break it up a little bit.
that's great. A great way of taking an honest look at your business and your industry, and really provides an inspiration for everyone who wants to have great talent. You have to think about diversity in that.
Mhm.
Um, Deborah Boggs brings such a great, you've been sharing all the tips and tricks to secure yourself an executive role or a board seat. And I know that folks will be able to see in the show notes ways to get in touch with you, but particularly for folks to visit dscareermanagement.com to learn more about Deborah Boggs' team and the work that they do. Deborah, if you were to offer, one piece of guidance or one piece of advice to those either interested in pursuing to growing their executive careers or to thinking about a board seat, what would that be? What would you tell our audience?
I know we touched on it, but it really, the very first thing you need to do is get clear on what you want. Because getting clear on what you want in the beginning makes every single step of this easier. It makes writing your resume easier. It makes writing your LinkedIn profile easier. It makes building a search strategy and the way you're going to take yourself to market easier. If you know your audience, your value, what their struggles are, what those kinds of companies are struggling with, understanding that makes everything run more efficiently for you. And I think that's the piece that a lot of people skip. People will call and say, I want a resume, or they'll start reaching out to their network. But without having that crucial piece in place first, they're kind of spinning their wheels. And so that's the big piece of advice I have.
Well, we're all about, on this podcast about producing dividends from people, about people-centered performance. And there isn't a better guest or speaker than you, Deborah, on this topic, particularly as it relates to executive careers, job search, and board candidacies. So thank you very much, Deborah. It's been great having you as a guest on The People Dividend.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate it.
And until the next episode of The People Dividend with Mike Horne, stay well.